You're listening to the Our Erie podcast with Davona,
Marty Nwachukwu,
and Lydia, Laythe.
We're here to highlight community voices and bring new perspectives to the table.
We are unpacking Erie's and America's baggage.
We're speaking truth to power.
Take a seat.
Armando, Marty, and I used to be in Erie County Young Dems together, and so we kind of knew each other personally, and it's amidst COVID has been a while since the three of us have gotten together and been able to chat. So with us today is Armando Reyes, and I will let him kind of take the lead in introducing himself and what, Armando, if you could just tell us what you do right now. I know you are a local entrepreneur and an artist, and so we want to hear kind of what you're doing, what you're working on right now.
Awesome. So thank you very much for having me. I'm honored now to be on this podcast. It's blown up so much. You've talked to so many cool and exciting and great people that I'm like flattered to be on here. So thank you very much. My name's Armando, and I own and operate Lake Erie Woodworks. We build custom furniture and cabinetry and all kinds of things related to wood. I also own and operate Lake Erie Drumworks. We build custom snare drums for musicians all over. We have several musicians here in Erie who are playing drums now. And my newest venture tied into all of this is the Lake Erie School of Woodworking. So one of the most important things to me working in the craft and in the trades specifically was to be able to at some point open our shop to the public to learn what we do, to learn about what we do, so that they themselves can continue this sort of tradition of woodworking on themselves, and whether they turn it into a business or just a hobby, we're just excited to be in a place where we can offer our space as a place of learning. Mm-hmm. That is the one thing that I'm hoping to grow most moving forward. Obviously, owning a business, everybody wants to, sell things and grow their business. I think having the opportunity to grow this part of our, endeavor to be part of the community is the most important thing, I think, for us, and if that helps to grow our business, that's fine. But, we really just want to open our shop to as many people as we can. So that's where we're headed at this moment.
It's super cool. I think prior to this, we were talking about kind of education and kind of just the opportunities to learn about different trades and things kind of outside the traditional, either you're in high school or you go to 4-year college, or we don't get exposure all the time to all these different options for what people can be doing and what you can be learning. Now, did you go to a school like that, Armando, to learn woodworking, or how did that start? Have you always done this?
No. So, I mean, for most of my life, yes, I've been involved in the trade. So for what I did mainly as a career is I worked as a mechanic. And so that's what I did out of high school, mechanic, just like anything else, is a trade. And so I went to technical school and graduated and became a mechanic. And I did that for a long time. And the woodworking part is sort of passed down through family. So my grandfather was a woodworker. And when he came to the States from Mexico, that's kind of really how he supported his family. Just making things in cabinetry. That's something that he learned when he was a kid. And so that was passed on to his 7 boys as they were growing up. And then all of them, my dad included and my uncles, had their own little basement workshops and, always fixing up things around the house. I'm originally born and raised in Chicago. So I lived there most of my life. We moved to Erie in 2007. But before that, in Chicago, nobody really has houses, right? So everybody lives in an apartment. And so at one point, like, my grandfather owned their apartment building. My parents owned our apartment building. My uncle owned his apartment building. And so there was always something broken and always something that needed to get fixed or replaced or repaired, because that's just the life of a landlord and having apartments. So yeah, everybody had something to work on and something to fix and had their tools and stuff. So that's where I learned. And then moving to Erie, living in our house and eventually buying our house, it was the same thing, like this needs fixed, or we want a cabinet for here, or we want a new table for this, or whatever it was. But I started to get into it more, for like the history of like furniture, and really sort of developed a passion for it. And so as that grew, I started making things, and then people said, "Oh, can you make me this?" And then, so, eventually it turned into a side business, and then eventually a full-time business. So that's kind of where we're at right now, and hoping to grow more, obviously, and just really just get our name out there, and like the work that we do, the service that we provide, and see what else we can do in Erie.
I love hearing stories about people who are exposed to some things that they still do now as an adult through their childhood. So like, how early did you start actually like helping your grandfather or your father in the workshop?
Yeah, I mean, like, we were kids, you know what I mean? Like, and my dad would always tell stories too, like when he was a kid, and my grandfather would be like, "Okay, it's the weekend, we have this job to do," and they would go on the bus, on public transportation, on the bus in Chicago with their tools to go to somebody's house to fix something, or build something for some person who lived somewhere on the other side of town. And then so he would drag, whoever was the oldest at the time that was still in the house, he would drag them over to do their work, and then they would come back. And so yeah, even since they were kids, and then I remember being a kid in my grandfather's shop, and then in my dad's or my uncle's, just always doing something. Always, there's always kind of thing going on. So yeah, ever since I was a kid, since those are some very early memories. And then I still remember, I can see like some of the tools, like, "Oh, I remember that thing was blue," and I don't know, you didn't know what it was at the time, but I remember this blue thing, and he had this cabinet here, and you can remember like the bathroom was over there, and there was a big pile of wood here, and kind of fuzzy memories, but it was since we were kids. Yeah.
Yeah, there's something really, I think, empowering about being able to fix things on your own too. And I think, was that something else that you had organized, Armando? It was like these little like, I'm gonna say the wrong, but like fix it cafe. Like people could bring something in and you would help fix it. What was that called?
Yeah, so that was a thing. There was somebody else was in charge of that, and I believe her name was Karen, and she was, it was her idea, and she basically came to me as, she wanted to have a thing where once a month or once a quarter or something like that, we could have an event where people can bring things to get fixed, right? Whether it's a toaster or the leg broken on your coffee table, something along those lines. And so we kind of had planned to figure something out, and COVID kind of crushed all of that for now. But she just came to me as a person that can said, "Hey, can we use you as like a expert in this whatever field for furniture, right? So if somebody does come in when we have this event, can you be there, offer some of your tools or some of your space or some of your knowledge to help fix things when people come in? The shelf is broken on your bookcase, or whatever kind of thing it was, small enough where that you could bring it, you could carry it in your car and bring it to here. Like, you're not going to come with your dining room table and we're going to fix it, but just little things. And so that was that whole idea. It never really got off the ground because, like I said, everything kind of shut down. But I still think that it's going to happen. Obviously, that would be something that would be cool to do. Who can bring, I don't know, whatever it is, light fixture, your lamp is broken, whatever kind of things that we can help with. And if we can have some materials there, some extra parts and some switches and things laying around, that maybe we can get some of these things up and running instead of throwing them away. Like, that's the whole point of that thing, is like, how can we stop people from throwing things away and repairing them like they used to? Unfortunately, most of the products today aren't made to be fixed or rebuilt, so that's kind of a problem also. But I still think there's plenty that people just don't have the knowledge sometimes, so that like, all it was the wire was loose on your lamp and now it's fixed. So that was kind of the genesis of that whole
Yeah,
thing.
it's
But
super
yeah.
cool. But yeah, and I think you bring up a good point about there's like a very real environmental incentive to not just throw away stuff at the first sign of it not working. Like if there's a way to fix it, figure it out. But for so many people, they're not lucky enough to have like a legacy of woodworkers in their life that,
No,
you know, they've
exactly.
grown up around. And so how beautiful to share that with the community. And I feel similarly about your plans to open, you know, to educate people and create the school of woodworking, because I think that similarly, right, like for the people that don't have that connection in their immediate circle or in their family, how powerful that can be to give them that.
Yeah, and I think it's just like you said, it's a matter of opportunity, right? Like one is the opportunity to get access to the knowledge, or to get access to the equipment, or to the space, you know, or the combination of those things.
Mhm.
Because you know this is the kind of thing that is passed down, right? Like this is very difficult to put in a book and then taught. It's not something that's like really structured where you could say, here is how this works, type in these numbers and then you get a result. You know, like this is something that takes, you know, experience and hands-on type of work to be passed down. And you know, sometimes like people will say, you watch, you hear things and they'll say, you know, you're because this is my business also, right? So you're like, well, you're teaching people how to do this, it's going to take away from your business or whatever. And it's like, well, if somebody didn't teach me how to do it, you know, I wouldn't be doing it, you know. So, and if I don't teach somebody how to do it, nobody else is going to know how to do it, you know. So you feel that I feel this personal responsibility to pass this knowledge down, just like we always pass our, you know, whatever, you pass down your culture, you pass down your language, you pass down whatever, you know, these are things that need to be passed on to other people. And you know, having us being fortunate enough to have the space to do that, and hopefully grow into bigger spaces to offer to more people, um that's the plan going forward. But yeah, you know, we feel that, I feel that, you know, we have a responsibility to teach that, and especially since that's not happening in schools anymore, you know. It's just I think it falls even more onto our shoulders to really push the availability and the access to people.
Mhm.
I think it's a shift in our culture that's really necessary. I know myself, COVID forced me to learn how to cook. Um, and before COVID, I had a comforter that I really loved that fell apart, and I had to force myself to learn how to sew it to change or to keep using it. And I feel I can speak for myself individually, but I don't think I would be far from the truth if I said, like, as a culture, for a long time, we've been very far away from a space where we had ownership of our things, and we felt that we could, if something broke, take care of it, or if something broke, we could go to a family member or other person who could fix it. And in a time where we're trying to be more sustainable environmentally, this is definitely a move we should be making and taking better care of our things.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we kind of swung that pendulum like really far, like most pendulums swing.
Mhm.
Like, you know, we were at a point in the 50s and you know, post World War II, where that's all we did was to fix our own things, right? Like everybody knew how to work on their own car and build their own furniture and like build their own house. Like that was a way of life. And then we kind of went into this like computer era, and it turned all into electronics, and then this is the wave of the future, and we kind of left those things
Mhm.
behind. And I don't want to say it wasn't for the wrong reason, because you know, there came a time where like the computer age was going to take over and you should learn how to do this, and that's great because it allows us to do these things that we do now with technology. But um we kind of left some things behind in that process. And I think we're finding that pendulum kind of swing back again, and realize that not only did we lose a big generation, and you know, and they lost the ability to do some of these things, but they realizing now that the generation that did have these skills are now, you know, going into an age where they're not doing it anymore.
Mhm.
And you know, the availability, you know, nobody ever thought like it's going to be hard to find a plumber, or like it's going to be hard to find a mechanic. But we're running into that situation now, where the average age of a lot of people working in the trades is pretty high, and we don't have the people coming behind them. That's where we see the problem. It's not that they're not there now, but once they're gone, there's not a whole lot of people to replace them, and then that's where we're going to have the problem.
Yeah, schools, like, I feel like we've created this gap, and I mentioned it earlier just now, but that we push people towards this 4-year college. And I think we're seeing that now with like the debate around canceling student debt, but that for many generations earlier on, going to college was a way to expand your opportunities and to expand your, ability to do more jobs or reach different potential. But now I almost see it as like the costs don't outweigh the benefits in some ways. And then you also, are creating these gaps where people aren't learning these skills. And these are really necessary skills. Marty was just saying earlier that, there's things like we rely on a plumber to know how it works. And it's all these things that are going on behind the scenes that we kind of take for granted, but like we need people to construct our furniture that we sit on and enjoy, and like the beautiful things that we keep in our home and the decor that we have, but like we like totally take it for granted. And I feel like, as a culture, we could do so much better. And as an education system, right? Like raising kids in this culture and raising kids and educating kids in this space, we could do so much better to encourage that for them.
This may be organizer Marty speaking, but I think it all ties back to, the shift in our culture for profit for everything. Everything had to be a money-making thing. So rather than us being able to fix our own things, there's money to be made in just making something quick and cheap that you can just replace.
Right.
The 4-year educational institution system has become this massive money-making thing that has a majority of us who go to school in debt. There has been this systemic planning or systemic or cultural shift that has taken away from the trades and it has encouraged, and because everyone is struggling, everyone wants their children to do well, our parents thought the only options for us was to go to college in a country where all the manufacturing jobs were leaving, so we kind of had a crisis that kind of shifted us to this culture where everyone had to go to school. And now we're in a space where like our infrastructure is falling apart. There are not enough plumbers. There are other trades jobs where the people who are doing those jobs are retiring. We're all kind of scrambling to try to find people to fill in these.
Yeah, and I think it's a shift. Like there needs to be a shift in the light that we see these tradespeople, right? Because they're always like talking like the greasy mechanic and the plumber with his crack hanging out, and like like we have these like stereotypes that we put on these people. And I think we need to kind of shift that, because like it's difficult to say like you go to college and you pursue this level and you gain all this intellect and you become this smart educated person, meaning that people who didn't go don't become these smart educated intellectual people. And it's kind of the opposite. Like I worked for years as a mechanic, right? And I worked on like high-end German automotive cars. And like if you don't think you need to be like a smart person to do that, like you're really wrong. Like it's a lot different from like your back alley mechanic, like laying on his back under a car, like getting all dirty and greasy. Like it's not the case anymore. I told people like on one of the cars that we would work on, there was 6 control modules in the headlight of the vehicle, right? So like in order to be able to communicate with these things now, like you got to be a computer scientist. Like you have to be able to communicate with all these things. They're running on networks, like they have Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and all of these things built into them that you have to fix each one of those, right? Like being a mechanic, you're a plumber because you're working on fuel lines, you're working on coolant lines, you're rebuilding engines, you're rebuilding transmissions, you're doing upholstery because you have to fix the seat. You know what I mean? Like all of these things are tied into being a mechanic. And so if you think of somebody who's working in a trade as like somebody who like doesn't have knowledge or isn't smart, and like you have to really rethink that. And then now working in the woodworking and carpentry field is some of the smartest people I know. Like try looking at a complicated like framing roof or something like that. There's so much math and angles and things involved. Like, it blows my mind that these people can just like do this in their head, you know. So we have to sort of shift that focus. Like, there's people who are go to college and they're smart for that, but just because you didn't doesn't mean like you took this step back, or like I decided on a lesser path. And it's like we have to keep, you know, people who are deciding to go into the trades, like, give them as much respect as somebody who's, you know, pursuing a, you know, becoming an engineer or a doctor, you know.
And I want to not challenge, but I want to say that like all work has value, you know, like our culture of, oh, a burger flipper should make $15 an hour. Everyone deserves the right to have a roof over their head, food in their bellies, and peace of mind, you know.
Absolutely.
As long as, and even if you don't work, like our value goes beyond what we do to make a living, and I want like that to shift also.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, I have a question for you, Armando. In like, in a culture that is not built in that mindset, right? Like in a space in the United States where we don't value people's just like inherent dignity, or we don't we're not encouraged to do what's for the common good. We're encouraged to go after the buck and to be pursuing profit. How did you find the space in which to start a business, but to still have the wherewithal to say, okay, but how can I be improving the community with, like, where does that come from?
So it comes from personal experience, right? Like, growing up in the inner city of Chicago, like, you understand how few opportunities there are, and how just being exposed to some things can really change somebody's life, right? And like I talked about college, like that gap between like you can go to college or we don't know what else to offer you, right? Like when I was in high school, our college fair was like a couple of the local universities, right? Like UIC, University of Illinois Chicago, Columbia University was there, which was kind of strange, and then all 4 branches of the military. That was our college fair, right? So there wasn't a whole lot of choices. It's like, here's an Ivy League school, or here's the military, or here's like the place you can go to that's kind of local. You know what I mean? Like none of it was like, but nobody ever said, here's a trade school, here's something that you can do. Like I went to college for a year, realized like I'm gonna be $50,000 in debt by the time I'm done with this. And I just thought to myself, I just need a good job. Like really at the end of the day, that's what it boiled down to for me. It's like, I just kind of want to have a good job. Like I want to go to work, I want to do a thing, and I want to come home. And I don't want to be buried in debt to do it, you know? So that's kind of where I ended up on the path to becoming a mechanic. But it was just the idea that nobody ever explained that to me. Like nobody ever told me, no, there's a different way. Like you could do a different thing. And part of it is because like, again, like we have this cultural idea that you should go to college and you should become whatever thing. And you should. I'm not going to tell anybody not to go to school or not. I always tell people, if you want to go to college, go, but know exactly what you want to do. You want to be 100% sure that I'm going because I want to be this thing, or I want to learn how to do this thing. And I think it's dangerous when people are like, yeah, I'm going to whatever university, and oh, I'm just going to major in this for now and we'll see how it goes. I was like, man, you don't want to be that person. Like if you're going to go to school because you're going to learn something. Like that's the idea of education, right? I'm going to learn this thing. And whether if it's, you know, English literature or brain surgery, like whatever you want to be, like, but pick something and pursue that path. And so like, you know, having this idea that, yes, I want to have this like business venture, which I would like to be successful in. It still doesn't mean, you know, it doesn't mean anything if, like how they say, you know, you climb the ladder, but you pull up the ladder behind you. Like you don't want to be that person. Like, you know what I mean? If I'm going to climb a ladder, like you have to bring somebody up with you. And again, it was just personal experience from like not having those opportunities growing up as a kid. Obviously you come from a bad neighborhood. You don't have great options for the education that you're in. You know, I sort of relive my history through my family. Like my father was the first one born here in the United States. So my grandmother was pregnant with him when they came here.
Mhm.
And but they ended up having 9 kids total. And you imagine the idea of like any immigrant family, like leaving their whole family, their whole life, their whole country
Mhm.
to come to find something better.
Mhm.
And then my parents did as best as they could. You know what I mean? I can't blame them, like, oh, we lived in a bad neighborhood and you didn't send me to the great school or whatever.
Mhm.
It's like they lived their life as best they could for us.
Mhm.
And then I felt like, I still have to do the same thing for my kids, right? Like we have to try to put them in the best situation that we can,
Mhm.
and whatever that means, like trying to send them to good school and trying to raise them in the right way, whatever the case may be. But,
Mhm.
you feel this like part of you that says, you knew what it was like to not have some of these things,
Mhm.
and how easy just exposing people to some of these opportunities can really make a change in somebody. And so that's kind of the driving force behind
Yeah.
wanting to be, open to the community and things like that.
No, that's so inspiring. Well, and it's almost like hand in hand as like your family tradition passed down to you was woodworking. It also seems like your family tradition was also a tradition of like helping each other and thinking about the future and thinking about the next generation and being more forward minded, as opposed to like so many stories of like quote unquote success that are like pull yourself up by your bootstraps and make it
Mhm.
good for yourself, and not
Yeah.
like no reference to the future or other people.
Yeah.
So it just seems like those kind of happened concurrently, that you were
Yeah.
you come from a long line of people that care about others.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, usually when you hear those stories of like, you always hear like, oh, I did it by myself, or like I'm a self-made person. And it's like you just look back a generation, it's like,
Right.
I'm gonna say no on that. Like there was plenty of help along the way. You know what I mean? There was so many
Right.
hurdles that you didn't have to jump through to get to the point of life that you're in. And I'm just about helping those people, like there's a lot of people who are jumping hurdles, and if one of those things I can help them over, then that's what I'm here to do.
You've been listening to the Our Erie podcast.
Community voices unpacking Erie's baggage and speaking truth to power.
You can continue the conversation on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter at Our Erie Series.
Funding provided by United Way of Erie and Ember+Forge.
Music produced by Light Shadow.
We appreciate you for listening to the Our Erie podcast. Until next time, take care of yourself.
Keep fighting the good fight.
Peace.